All right, hello everyone. We had several questions come in this past Sunday. I appreciate all of the interest for this. And the first question I want to deal with is a very good question. It's been asked by a lot of people for several centuries now. And that is, if Jesus is God, then how is it while Jesus was on the earth, he was praying to God? If he is God, then wouldn't he simply be talking to himself? That's a very good question. So let me try to break this down as succinctly as I know how. First off, let me remind everyone that from the very first chapter of the Bible, we find God talking to himself. In Genesis 1, verse 26, he says, "Let us make man in our image." So there's one God, but he's speaking as if he is a we or an us. So we see right away that this scenario of a conversation happening within the Godhead is very possible. All right, so remember this, that even Jesus, while he was on the earth, he did support the idea that there is one God. There's no doubt about that. In Mark 12, he made that very clear. He repeats Deuteronomy chapter 6, the Lord thy God is one. So that there's no confusion, no argument there. Jesus believed in one God. But Jesus also made several comments that would indicate he is God. He said, before Abraham was, I am. He said in John 10, I and the Father are one. He said in John 14, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So Jesus made several statements that would indicate he is God. Now, Paul summed it up very well in 1 Timothy 3:16 when he said, without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh. Here's what you have to remember. When Jesus was born, this is God coming down in human form. So God, because he's God, he can manifest himself in more than one way at the same time, and he can do so in different places. So God, in his natural essence or substance, as the church fathers like to put it, God is a spirit, and the Father remained such while his Son was on the earth, the human manifestation of God. And as a human, he now has the faculties of a human, that is, a mind and a will and so forth. And we read clearly that the will of the Father and the will of the Son were two separate things. Jesus made that clear when he prayed in Gethsemane, not my will, but thine be done. Now, does this take away from Jesus being God? The fact that he had a separate will, a separate mind, the fact that he was human? Not at all. He is the human manifestation of God. So, can God be in more than one place at one time? Yes. Can he manifest himself in different ways in those different places at the same time? Yes. So when we see Jesus talking to God, the Father, that doesn't do away with the idea of Jesus' deity, that he is God. That actually supports the idea of Trinity, and that is there's one God, but manifest in three persons. Now, for the sake of our question, we're just talking about Jesus and the Father, so those two persons. But the idea that Jesus is talking to the Father, that manifests that he came down in a different form. So one form of God is speaking to another form of God. Now, this is consistent with what Paul said in Philippians chapter 2, and I'd just like to read it for you. And as you hear this, you will hear in this passage that that with Christ coming down to the earth and God being manifest in the flesh, he had his own mind. Now it says here, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. So now we hear this separate mind. That, you see, that mind, that is why the early Christians realized that there were more than one persons in the Godhead, because there were separate wills and a separate mind mentioned. It says, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. So when God came to the earth, and he has the name Jesus, he has now taken on a different form. So now you have this human form speaking to the natural form or essence, and that is God as a spirit. So all we're learning when Jesus speaks to the Father in prayer is that one member of the Godhead can speak to another member of the Godhead. It supports the idea that Jesus was not only God when he was on the earth, he was also human. He had this form of a servant. Now, we've dealt with the more intellectual side of that question, and I'd like to maybe approach the same question from a slightly different angle, in case the one who was asking about it was thinking along these lines. If Jesus is God, why did he pray to God? Wouldn't he already know what the mind of the Father is, even if you accept the idea that they were two separate minds and wills? Because he's the human manifestation of God, why would he have to ask the Father? But in the same passage that I just quoted you from Philippians chapter 2, remember that Paul said that Jesus, he humbled himself and he took upon himself the form of a servant. And with that willing humility, that willingness to submit to the Father, he had to act as a human would have to act, as a servant would have to act towards any master, and that is consistently checking with God, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? So Jesus's behavior in speaking to the Father and praying consistently, that is consistent with what a human servant would need to do in order to please God and fellowship with God. So I hope that helps answer that portion of the question, in case that was what the questioner was wondering about. If there's anything else I can help with on this question or any other question, please feel free to leave a comment below, or you can find us on Facebook at Bible Baptist Church of Potch. I really do appreciate your time. I hope you have a great day further.